What's up guys, Barry here, and in this video we're going to go over 6 levels of making bass lines within Maschine. And the first level is going to be pretty straightforward, and that's to simply use the root notes within your chord progression to build your bass line. To get a clearer idea of the chords, here's the piano part soloed. The easiest way would be to copy over the Midi and just take the most bottom notes as your bass line, but with the chords in different inversions, it's easier for me to just draw it out. In this level, you'll simply use the root notes from the chord for the entire duration the chord is being played. Alright, so level 1 is as straightforward of a bass line as you can get. For level 2, let's start adding some rhythm to the bass part. For the rhythm of our bass line, we'll take cues from the drums. And more importantly, we'll take cues from the kick. Alright, so it's a pretty syncopated kick drum pattern. And what I'm taking away from it is the kicks on the and the end of the beat. So we can use those rhythmic cues for our bass line. With those small rhythmic changes, it's already sounding much better. So let's take those rhythmic ideas and bring them throughout the other chords. Using perfect fifth intervals and octaves are a great way to develop your bass line. If you're not too familiar with intervals and their names, a perfect fifth is simply 7 semitones up from your starting note. So the perfect fifth of C is G. That works, but an option I like better would be to use the B note to bridge the two chords, as B is the major seventh of C and the third of the next chord. It'll make the change more harmonically interesting in my opinion. So I like that a little bit better. Now with the next chord, let's go back to the idea of using perfect fifth intervals. So the fifth of F is C. That actually works out really well, since with the first chord change we walk down to the root, with this chord change we're walking up to it. This is an idea to explore in the next levels. To finish this level off, we'll use an octave and the fifth to keep the progression moving. And for the final note, we'll use the B again to bridge the C and the G chords, similar to what we did with the beginning of this progression. By the way guys, I'm using Native Instruments' new session bassist Prime Bass for this video. And if you're interested in checking out the video I did for the plugin, I've left it in the description along with some other goodies. With that said, here's the 4th level. When building bass lines or lines in general, I like ones that have an up and down movement. Personally, I gravitate towards phrases that are more fluid. So in this level, we'll explore the idea of walking up and down to the root notes to create an even more fluid line. We'll start with adding an E, walking up to the F chord, and to make our way down to the next chord, we'll jump up an octave and again use that E to move to our next chord, the D minor. We have an opportunity again to walk down to our next chord from the high A. And to head back to the beginning of our chord progression, we'll create a line that this time walks up, creating a wave-like fluidity throughout the entire chord progression. For level 5, we'll attempt to make the bass line sound less MIDI. We'll do so by creating variations between the different MIDI notes. So the first thing I'm going to do is disengage the grid so I can move the notes freely. Next, I'm going to select all the notes and shorten them so they're not all legato. We'll revisit specific notes later. To create some alternate articulations, I'm going to shorten every other 16th note to make them more staccato. Also, I'm going to revisit the notes before each root note on a chord change. I'm going to extend the Midi and make them legato once again. Next, we'll adjust the velocity on some of the notes. First, I'll increase the velocity on the longer root notes just to emphasize the chord. Next, I'm going to grab those 16th notes that we shortened and raise their velocity up as well. And for the 16th notes that weren't touched, I'll bring them up just a little less than the really short ones. Since it's a softer instrumental, I don't want the notes hitting at too hard a velocity, so I'll highlight them all and bring them all down to give them an overall softer touch. And the last thing I'm going to do with velocity is for the walking runs. I'll make the velocity move similar to the notes. So if the run is moving down, the velocity will move down, and vice versa. Just remember that every subtle change we make gets us closer to the idea of making it more realistic, as if it were played in versus drawn in. For the 6th level, you're going to see some additional notes within the bass line. The ideas and concepts discussed from levels 1 through 5 remain. But before we get to it, I'm going to quickly ask you guys to hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already, and to consider subscribing for more beat making content. For this last level, you'll want to use the tools given by whatever plugin you're using. Prime Bass, for example, has a key switch for slides. So I'm going to draw in a MIDI note when there's some octave jumps to trigger a small slide. If you have a MIDI keyboard with a mod wheel, the mod wheel in Prime Bass is connected to the vibrato. So the last thing I'll do is draw in some automation with the mod wheel to create some vibrato on the longer held notes. Alright, so that was pretty much the 6th level soloed. Here's the bass part in context with the entire instrumental.